You've called this plan daring, yet it is comparable to the emissions reduction seen under the current federal system. So if it truly is daring, why not go further and try to reduce emissions even more than what we currently have?
It's daring because we're going further in protecting jobs, in growing the economy, and making sure we have a prosperous Canada after COVID-19. We match Mr. Trudeau's emission reductions by 2030. It's a smart plan to reduce emissions, but it's vastly superior on securing and creating jobs, getting our economy back to work in all sectors and in all regions of the country. That's what makes it daring. It actually grows the economy. Mr. Trudeau is running up massive debts and less opportunity, particularly for young Canadians. So young Canadians can look at the Conservative plan and say, there's a future for me in job creation in Canada while we reduce emissions.
Next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
David Aiken, Global News.
Yeah, thanks very much. I hope you can hear me. The audio is not great for those of us dialing in. I think I want back to what Marie was asking about, and I just hear the answer, Erin. We have BC and Quebec and Atlantic Canadian provinces who already have a plan to meet national objectives of climate change. Those provinces approved. Alberta has a plan on large emitters that the Alberta government seems to like, as well as Ottawa. So can we just go over where there are provinces with a plan that meets national objectives? Will they be exempt from the low-cost carbon savings account?
As I said, this is the plan I'll be presenting to the provinces to partner with them. Rather than forcing on the provinces a plan that Mr. Trudeau said he would never force on the provinces and then did, we're proposing this as a measure that would be a federal approach to backstop emissions together. Provinces that have plans with equivalency, we will respect that. We're the party about respecting the provinces and working together to reduce emissions. What's exciting about this proposal, David, is we can actually reduce emissions at the same rate as the Liberal plan without a tax and by growing the economy. So it's innovative, but if provinces have some innovations as well, this will be the type of partnership we have to get our economy back on track post-COVID.
Thanks very much. And I just want to come on the issue of the carbon tariff. I'd like to hear a little more about that. A tariff, as you know, is by definition a tax. It is collected by a government and collected from consumers in the jurisdiction where the tariff is imposed. So that's a tax on carbon. And I wonder what you think of that, given that quite clearly would raise consumer prices on a variety of imported goods.
I'm glad you've asked about the carbon border adjustment tariff, David, because I think most Canadians don't want to see Canadian jobs being shifted to China, where they don't respect the climate change commitments democratic countries are meeting, where their aluminum, where their steel is 5, 6, 7 times more carbon intense than the incredible production in the Saguenay region or in British Columbia or in Ontario. So I think Canadians know that tariff will price out some of these bad actor country products in a way that other countries are looking at as well. So I want to work very closely with the US to make sure we're not uncompetitive for jobs here in Canada. We are going to set an industrial approach that never has us out of step with the US and the EU, and we're going to push to have that adjustment tariff on bad actor countries who are gaming the global approach to reducing emissions and hurting Canadian workers.
We will take the next question from the floor. Nous allons prendre la prochaine question de la salle.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. O'Toole, I want to ask you about these personal savings accounts. It seems like a really big job to set up something like this nationwide, kind of on the scale of air miles or PC Optimum points. And then on the other end, the government is going to dictate how that money can be spent once it's rebated through this large mechanism. Why do it this way? You have a system now that is comparatively simple. Carbon is priced at source, and then consumers are rebated at tax time. Why create all this infrastructure?
the carbon tax of Mr. Trudeau, which is increasing, breaking his own promise, is not simple. It's not transparent. And most families, commuters in Vaughan or Whitby or Burnaby or Surrey, they will not be getting rebates back to the point of their purchases of gas and other commodities. That's why Mr. Trudeau's covering up their modeling. We're putting the consumers in charge. It will be a 1/3 carbon price, and the low carbon savings account allows them full transparency and then decisions. And I'm sure many Canadians, if they look on their smartphone or in their wallet, have many loyalty and point systems. This is actually less complex and very easy to administer. And Canadian companies and consumers have been innovators in these places. If we want everyone to be part of our plan to have a lower carbon future, we need to trust Canadians. That's what our plan does.
But under this plan, people who spend more on carbon, fill up their gas tank twice a week, are going to have more money to spend, and people who spend nothing won't get any rebates. So are you not incentivizing spending on carbon, and people who have a low carbon lifestyle already, who use public transit or walk or ride the bikes to work, get nothing?
They will get exactly in their savings account, Glenn, what they consume. This is the most fair, the most completely transparent, and rather than sending billions into the opaque hole of government where Mr. Trudeau keeps raising taxes, is running an out-of-control debt, this will allow Canadians to feel in charge. And then if they have modest savings in their low carbon savings account, they may take a few years to upgrade that bike if they're in a city. Other commuting families may pool that account over years to purchase a hybrid or an EV. Some Liberal governments have been paying wealthy people tax credits for Teslas. That's the backwards thinking of Mr. Trudeau and the small group of elites around him. This is about respecting Canadian consumers, lowering emissions just as effectively as Mr. Trudeau, but actually focusing on jobs and economic growth.
There are no more questions in the room, so we will take the remainder of the question on the phone. Il n'y a plus de questions dans la salle, donc nous allons prendre le restant des questions dans la salle, au téléphone. Donc, operator, next question.
Brian Platt, National Post.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. You're arguing this isn't a carbon tax, but the fact is this puts a carbon charge onto fuel that consumers will pay. It functions basically like a carbon tax. Aren't you playing with words here to avoid the fact you're breaking your promise to scrap the carbon tax?
Brian, $0 go to government. This is not a tax at all. I have said it is a pricing mechanism for consumers. It will be 1/3 the pricing of Mr. Trudeau's ever-rising carbon tax, but nothing goes to government. It is not a tax. And I think Canadians who are quite accustomed to smart purchasing decisions and managing their own finances and affairs will see the benefit of complete transparency and then their decisions on purchases in the future to help them lower their emissions. Not the black hole of Mr. Trudeau's government where he spends $6 billion a year on his consultants. This is about putting Canadians in the driver's seat and having a transparent approach to reduce emissions.
I've heard you say in the past that CPP contributions are a payroll tax, but CPP contributions also don't go into government coffers. So how is this any different?
Well, there's two parts of payroll taxes on the employee and the employer. And so what we have to do is try and work with industry and work with consumers to make sure we can lower emissions without putting Canadians out of work. Mr. Trudeau won't release his models because he doesn't want to tell commuting families how much they're actually paying. And he also doesn't want to warn Canadians on how many thousands of jobs will be lost over time because our economy is becoming less competitive. This is transparent for consumers. It's going to keep our industrial price competitive with other democratic countries that price carbon for large emitters. And it's going to make bad actors pay. Canadians are tired to see bad actor countries who don't follow the rules with respect to trade or emission reduction or human rights for that matter, benefiting and seeing Canadian jobs leave our country. So the carbon border adjustment tariff and our work with allies will help address that as well.
Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur O'Toole.
Mr. O'Toole.
Vous avez critiqué la taxe sur le
You
carbone
criticized the
pendant des années.
liberal carbon tax for years, and now you're proposing a carbon price. How do you explain your change of view? It's not a change, it's a tariff, yes, but not a tax for Canadians. With a personal savings account for carbon reduction, Canadians will be in charge with transparency, total transparency, and it's possible for Canadians to purchase products in the future, green products, for the environment. We need to work together on climate change, and our approach is an approach of respect for provinces and for consumers too. Okay, this savings account you're talking about, how will you know who's consuming whatever? You say it's like air miles. So that means more we buy fuel, more money we'll have for bicycles, etc. Isn't this an incentive to consume more fuel? I don't think so. I think it's an approach that Canadians will look at the carbon footprint with total transparency. And it's an innovative approach, yes, but not a tax. And I'm proud of our plan because we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions with the same approach as Mr. Trudeau's plan, without a tax and without reducing our economy. Next question.
Alcia Raj, Press Gallery.
I understand what you're saying, that you think that this is not a carbon tax because zero money goes to the government, but you did spend the entire leadership race saying that you were going to fight the carbon tax with every last breath, that you suggested industry rather than individual Canadians would fit the bill for emissions. What do you tell Conservatives now, including members of your own caucus who feel betrayed?
I tell them I'm ending Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax and putting forward a smart, market-based, transparent approach to reduce emissions that is equally as effective as Mr. Trudeau's high tax approach at reducing emissions, but our approach is vastly superior in securing jobs and economic activity. And Althea, I'm really proud that the modeling from top experts in Canada confirms an equivalence in emission reduction with our plan, but a vastly superior increase in economic activity. It's a win-win. It's transparent. I'm very excited. It's innovative. It's time for innovation on the environment.
Well, the experts that were part of the briefing said it was comparable. They didn't say it was equivalent. And also, we know that we actually need to do far more than the Paris targets. And your plan is kind of silent on what the next step is. But I just want to go back to this feeling of betrayal by Conservatives.
My plan is not silent. We've got a number of other investments in small modular reactors, in hydrogen, in setting our economy up in a serious way to be competitive with the countries we compete with, trade-exposed sectors, while reducing emissions, not by shutting down jobs and taxing people like Mr. Trudeau. So the plan has some smart investments that will actually help us set up for success in the future. Mr. Trudeau has failed on his targets every year he's been Prime Minister. We have a plan that's setting up the ingredients for us to succeed.
Dernière question. Operator, last question.
Christy Kirkup, Globe and Mail.
Hello. Just to pick up on a question that was asked by a colleague in French just regarding the personal carbon savings account, have you not just created a reward program for fossil fuel consumption?
We've actually eliminated Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax and allowed transparency for every Canadian, every small business, every farming family will see what their carbon footprint is. Why has Mr. Trudeau been hiding and covering up and blacking out documents with their modeling on what people will pay and what they think people consume with respect to hydrocarbons? This is completely transparent. It's innovative. It puts consumers in the driver's seat, and not a penny goes to Ottawa. It stays with those small businesses who want to make decisions on lowering their footprint. I think it's pretty innovative. It will take some time for people to really absorb how innovative this is, but I'm so proud that the modeling shows we will have emission reductions in the same way as Mr. Trudeau's, but better outcomes for jobs and investment.
But Mr. O'Toole, speaking of being in the driver's seat, this plan provides no incentive for consumers to reduce their gasoline or fossil fuel consumption. Why?
Yes, it does. In fact, with their low carbon savings account, they can make that purchase of a hybrid or EV. They can plan. They can see what they're consuming. If they're commuting to a job to the GO station in Southern Ontario or from Surrey into Vancouver, they will know what they are paying. And then they can make a plan at a household level to say, how long will it take for us to have some savings account contribution to a purchase of an EV? Our national EV standard as well, which is going to look at and partner with what some of the provinces are doing, are going to make this a reality that will allow Canadians to make smart decisions without sending billions and billions of more dollars into the black hole of the Liberal government in Ottawa.